Good afternoon, everybody. I can see that we still have people joining, so we will hold for a second while people are joining the meeting, and waiting a bit for our president to give him a chance to join the meeting from the AGM that has just happened before this meeting. And I think we are lucky. No, we're not. We're still hoping that we will get him. Otherwise, we will start shortly. So, warm welcome to the webinar "Value Beyond the Deal" that is being held by the INSEAD Alumni Association in Sweden. We're shortly going to start, and we are delighted that you have all taken out of your busy times and joining us during busy days, especially on the topic. I think we now have our president that has joined us. So I'll give you President of INSEAD Alumni Sweden, Andrew Christensen.
Yes, welcome everyone. Sorry for the delay. I was, as usually, struggling to find the right link here. There were so many to choose between, but we are very excited to have you joining us today for this webinar on value beyond the deal. So we have two very competent and speakers who are both speakers and also, as you can see on the slide here, the moderators. So Liselott Engstam, who is the IDN board member and also non-executive chair at several listed companies and private companies. And also Katja Severin Danielsen, who is partner at PwC and board member on a couple of boards and will today be moderating our chat. So please remember to ask your questions in the chat section. And as you hopefully all know, we have the INSEAD Alumni Association that is focused on global and lifelong learnings, and this is an activity and a webinar that helps us strengthen the competences of the business leaders of the world. So thank you all for participating, and let's move to the next slide. Business School INSEAD, global, very international, highly active in helping to change the world for the better, as you have probably also read and heard about. So I think we can skip to the next slide also in the interest of time. And then we have the associations, so the national associations. We have global groups that are consisted of these graduates from the different MBA programs, executive MBA programs, other management programs and board programs led by the INSEAD school. It's often a very diverse group of individuals who have also in many cases worked in different countries and are today active in many of Sweden's top firms and boards. Also in Sweden, of course, it's as you can see, or as you often hear about, it's really a hot country to be in terms of private equity. And we are excited to hear more about that from Mikael Ahlström, who will join us a bit later. So let's move to the next picture.
Okay.
So over to you, Liselott.
Thank you so much, and warm welcome to all our participants and indeed our speakers. Sofia Nordenskjöld, partner at PwC, and Mikael Ahlström, founder of Procuritas. We will be introducing both of them a bit more just before they are going to speak. Why did we pick this topic? So this is a chart which just shows that the M&A amount has never been so high as it is right now. And if we look at what industries it's in, it's a lot in telecom, IT technology, but there's also a lot in industrial, in financial services, and in energy. In fact, Sweden is actually in top globally in terms of the bidders, which means we have a very strong private equity industry as well, and our listed companies are also doing a lot of acquisitions. But it's actually also in top of targets to being acquired. which is very interesting. And we have a new phenomena that has entered the market, something called SPAC. And it's basically, you can say, a blank check IPO. You don't have all of the companies that you need to fill it up. And I know that our speaker, Sofia, will talk more about it. So that brings us to just sharing what will happen. We will have a talk, then we will have a short experience sharing by Mikael. We will ask you questions meanwhile, so we'll get your input, and then we'll do interviews, and we're going to ask you to provide questions as well to the speakers. And then we will ask our president back to do a summary and get us to the next. Let me start with introducing Sofia. So Sofia is a partner at PwC, and she's heading the Swedish M&A integration and carve-out practice. And we just talked about before you all entered that she is super busy, of course, in this situation. And so we're very grateful to have her. She has a long background, and even if she's Swedish and based here, this is actually a bit more new to her because she has spent a lot of her careers outside of Sweden, which is very common actually with a lot of people that has graduated from INSEAD as well. So Sofia is a very experienced and in the hot eye of what we're going to talk about. Sofia, warm welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, Liselott. So, hi, very nice to meet you all during this virtual session. And I will share a few slides with you today. I am a consultant after all, so what would I be if I didn't have my PowerPoint slides with me? So I will talk about this subject, which comes very close to my heart since I'm coming from a more operational perspective from the beginning. It's all about creating value beyond the deal. And as Liselott just mentioned, the market is extremely hot. It has been hot for several years. The COVID did a short kind of pause, and a year ago, we were not really sure where the market was heading, but we saw it was really more just a pause, and then it came back even stronger than we had anticipated. And coming back a bit to the numbers, if we are just looking back compared to a year ago, we have a growth in the EMEA region with 12% of the number of deals. However, if we narrow it down to the Nordics, it has increased by 37%, which kind of explains why it doesn't go a day by where you don't read in the newspaper that something is being sold, bought, acquired, merged, IPO. It's a reason. It's because it's extremely high activity in the market. However, what we also see when we talk with the business and our clients, what we also see in the market is there is a huge amount of capital out there. However, maybe not as much targets as you would like. So the prices are extremely high. The multiples are high, which means that you want to ensure that you actually are getting the most out of your deal and that you are placing a bid, which you also think is you would be able to generate value from. So that is a bit what creating value beyond the deal is. It's not just buying a company and then just crossing finger and hoping that this will go as planned. We see it as you're adapting a more value creation mindset, looking to all various aspects of the transactions just to ensure that you will be able to promise what you deliver to your stakeholders, to your shareholders, that you will maximize the deal value. So if we just go to the next slide, we have some statistic here where it says that 61% of the acquirers believe that the last acquisition generated value. However, looking at the financials, 53% underperform their industry peers on average over the next coming 24 months. So this is maybe not that flattering statistics for the companies, but on the good end, you can work with it. And that is what we will talk about a bit now. And what can we learn from the ones who succeed and what can we do better? So we did a survey which we call creating value beyond the deals, where 600 executives around the world were questioned to understand what do they do well and what can they work with. So it comes down to 3 core areas, which we can look at the next slide. And that is to stay true to the strategic intent, be clear on the element of comprehensive value creation plans, and last but not least, put culture to the heart of the deal. So these are the 3 areas, and I will do a short deep dive into each of them. So starting with staying true to the strategic intent. And we can go to the next slide. Where we say that 86% of the buyers, they actually said that the last acquisition that generated value was part of a broader strategy and the portfolio. It was meant to be. And I think that you can put this back to your daily life. It's not that often that you buy something opportunistic suddenly, which you have not thought about, which comes out as a good investment. It can be those golf clubs, it can be a pair of skis, it can be a dress. Few things that you buy on sale is rarely the best thought you have ever done. It can be, but you also must know the things that you have looked into, evaluated, have some thought into, normally actually is what you generate value for you, and you will keep it for a longer time. And the same goes with the business. Why are you buying a company? Is it because you want to go into a market? Is it because they offer a product? Is it in line with your expansion? It's come back. What will you do with it? So it's really important to have a plan, just not buying because you suddenly think that you have gotten a great deal. The other part is coming back to the value creation plan, which we'll talk about in the next slide. But the whole idea is that if you have, for example, the idea that you're doing this to expand in a market, ensure also that that is what you are going to look into in your due diligence. So you're not only doing due diligence for the sake of it, but it should be a purpose, and ensuring that what you really want to know is also being a part of the due diligence process, not just doing a financial or tax due diligence because you always do it. Maybe then looking into, I want to know more of this. How are we going to approach it in the due diligence process? So that's the key part here with staying true. Why are you doing it? So by going then to the next slide, which is then be clear of the elements of a comprehensive valuation plan. And then coming back to the statistics, 34% of the acquirers said that they had a plan in place. However, then 66% say that they should have had one in place. So most of the companies acknowledge them that they should have thought about this a bit more thorough before making the deal. And first of all, you need to be clear of all elements of the plan. Why are you doing this? Come back to what's the plan? What's the idea? It's a blueprint. It's not just a checklist like ticking in a box what you should do. It's actually how do you envision to incorporate this in your line of business? What will you do with it? How will it generate value? And the second part is then ensuring a thorough and effective due diligence process. Coming back to what I talked about, what do you really want to know to generate value? Is it to understand the financial structure, the tax structure? Is it to understand how you can improve operations? Then do a due diligence on those tasks so that you are well prepared of what might lie ahead, and also to see if I want to create value, what opportunities do I have? Because we can see that most of, and especially here, Mikael, you coming from the private equity industry, you have been good in the PE to think about, okay, we can do working with the net working capital, we can do a tax optimization, etc. But we see when we talk a lot of our companies that this is something that they look into when they have acquired the company. And our seeing is that if you start looking into it before you're acquiring, then you know a bit more actually what potential you have. And knowing the potential, you then know how much you're actually prepared to pay for a company, which then means that you actually have the true value of it. And so it's not only the financials, as I mentioned, it can be the strategic repositioning, such as market entry, products, looking at the revenue generation. It can be the optimizing the operating model. So it can have been, how do I have an improved supply chain? what can I do with my procurement functions? Should I maybe outsource part of the business because that can lower the cost and compared to what they're doing today? Or maybe it's actually better to not have it outsourced because they can do it better way. So then again, having due diligence on the operational aspects. And the third part is then the balance sheet optimization, the tax structure. Tax is something which often has been kind of put in the behind, and then when you are making the deal, you also bring in the tax team. However, due to the complicated tax structure several businesses have today, or complex, it might be what you think that you can do by unwinding some of the structure is maybe not is possible, but it might cost you a lot in taxes and tax leakage. So ensure also that all this competence which you're planning to do something with is actually involved in the beginning, not to lose out of the opportunities or missing the fact that they can be more expensive than you thought. The last part here I just want to mention is what we see has come more and more just during the last 2 years. It's the ESG, so environmental and social impact. And here it has moved from being a more kind of value confirmation, so to say, it has been more to risk management, that we need to have a few tick in the box, to more becoming a value creation. How can we improve our offering? How will the customers react? And we did a survey recently focusing on private equity, and there more or less 56% of the people answering, the companies answering the survey mentioned that they actually left a deal because the ESG plan or how they will work with it was not good enough. And since private equity normally has planned to sell a company in the near future, of course, they want to know that what I buy today, I will be able to sell it in 5 to 10 years. So we see that the ESG topics, going back just 2 years ago, it has increased with 21% of the kind of how high you put it on your agenda when you're looking at the deals. So that is something which we really see has coming more and more just recently. It has always been there, but it has now moved from a checklist, a checkpoint to actually part of the strategic plan. So that was it on the value creation plan. So the last area, last but not least again, is to put the culture at the heart of the deal. And statistics again here, 82% of the companies says that they lost significant value, also lost 10% of the key employees. And here we often see that I have been on various roadshows, etc., with CEOs who has this great plan. They have a strategy, they have an ambition what they do in the company, and they talk with employees who might have just been acquired, and they don't really want to know about the strategy until they, 1, knows that they still have a job, 2, they will still get paid, and 3, knows what will happen with the brand because the brand is important to the culture. So it's all about trying to understand what do actually the people need to hear and how can you, in the best way, give them that information. It often comes out with that communication is too poor. You always want more, and often you actually can give more information than being given. So communication is a key fact. Another part is the cultural barriers, because it is not easy to integrate various culture, and people normally put themselves, I work for a company, I put myself into that brand and feel about them. So if I was suddenly going to have a new brand, of course, that would affect me. And it might be that I've been acquired by a company which I don't want to be a part of that culture. So it's very much a people business in that way. And you often see this, and the tech business especially has experienced this, because what you see is that large corporate companies, might be traditional ones, they are not able to develop certain technical platforms because they don't have the skills and they don't have the talent to do that. So one way of doing it is actually acquiring a company. But again, it's a reason why some people like to work for a startup or a tech company, because they like that type of environment. They didn't choose to work for a large global corporate. They wanted to choose a startup. Again, then, how do you keep those talents? Because you have bought that company because the people in it. So how do you keep them happy? How do you ensure that you keep the talent? So it's a very important aspect, and you can't really start thinking of that after you have done the deal. You need to start thinking of that from the start. how do I ensure that we get a good cultural mix, as good as it gets? How do we plan for it? How do we work together? And how do I ensure that the people I really want to keep also know that they are on top of my list? So I think that was the last part I wanted to include here before you got tired of me. So the 3 things to remember is stay true to the strategic intent, have a plan, and don't forget about the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sofia. Really interesting and very clear, and much easier when you get a bit of grasp over the industry. So thank you so much. We will now move over to our next presenter, which will be Mikael Ahlström. As we already shared in the invite, Mikael has a very strong background in the private equity industry, also in the commercial industry. He is a founder of several investment companies, actually, including Procuritas, but also including now Byggmästare Anders, which I think is your grandfather's company from the beginning, so you'll have to enlighten us a bit on that. But he's also an additional founder on a number of non-profit and ESG-related opportunities, maybe we should say. And he has several board assignments that relates to this. I think also to understand a bit about your background, I think it's very interesting. I mean, you were part of actually creating the private equity industry in Europe, and you were named when INSEAD had its 50th anniversary as one of the 50 alumni who have changed the world. So warm welcome to you, Mikael, and we look forward to hearing your experiences and perspectives on the topic.
Well, thank you very much, Liselott, and it's nice to see everyone who's also on the list of participants. There are some old friends there, and special hello to you. I called Liselott just before the meeting because when we scheduled this meeting, I didn't know where in the world I would be. But now with 2 vaccine shots, I'm of course in transit somewhere in the world. You will hear some strange noises maybe in the background, but hopefully everything is going to work out well. Let's go into some thoughts in relation to Sofia's presentation. I think many of the things you said resonates extremely well with how you should approach deals. You have to prepare yourselves very well before. You have to think through, and you have to engage people before you do the transaction. It's so much more productive and efficient to do that than trying to fix problems after you've done the deal. But I think the last point is really where, at least from my experience, which is now almost spanning 40 years, the last point about culture is extremely important. I wouldn't say that strategy is unimportant, of course. Strategy is very important, and we don't want to let go all these thousands of people who deal with strategy consulting, would we? So, but if we simplify it extremely, it's trying to find a sector where you can buy low and sell high. If you do that, and you have nice barriers to entry, etc., over time you make money, you create value. And I can go into that a little bit, how we are thinking. We have something which we call the 4 M's, the 3 C's. The 4 M's are market, man, moat, and money. The 3 C's are capture, create, and crystallize. We can talk about them a bit later. But I think in the end, it's like Peter Drucker minted that culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you don't have a culture in the company where you constantly try to improve something, or you have a joint goal and everyone knows what the goal is, and you continuously work on that goal, you continuously work on processes over and over again, it's hard to really succeed. So for me, when we look at companies, We of course look at the culture, and we look at the people. And that's one of the M's, the man or the woman running the show. You cannot think IKEA without Ingvar Kamprad. You cannot think about the Berkshire Hathaway without Warren Buffett and, in a way, Charlie Munger. And then you can also, there's certain countries in the world through the history which has been dominated by a dictator or president. They have been malign organization. If you look at IKEA and if we look at Berkshire Hathaway, they're benign. But one person can influence a company incredibly, or just call it an organization or a country. And therefore, the selection, evaluation, the training, the fostering of the people running, and the integrity, honesty, etc., have to be an extremely important part when you make acquisitions. I hope the backdoor noise is not disturbing too much. No, Liselott shakes her head. It sounds good. But if we go back a little bit to how we're thinking when it comes to acquisitions, the company has to have a market, some kind of market. I've been mostly involved for the better part of my career with fairly mature companies where you have already a market. But recently, or not recently, in parallel with my private equity business, I've also been involved with venture capital. And I recently set up a special vehicle, which is just a personal venture capital vehicle. But when you do startups, of course, you always have to have a market, but it's harder to see how the product or service fits to the market than when you have an existing mature company which has been around for 45, 50 years. The next part is the man or the woman, and I already explained how we're thinking there. And then you have the moat. How wide or deep is the moat? How strong is the castle, your company, against attacks from others? Have they invented new arms which can easily invade the castle, even though you have a very wide moat? And then in the end, it's money. How much money does it cost to buy the company and also to develop it organically or through acquisition? Is there a buy and build theme or strategy? And then looking at the acquisition itself, can we capture any value? Do we feel that the inherent value is lower than the price? Are we paying a price which is lower than the value? And then creation, what can we do to create value? And as Sofia pointed out, there are several ways you can create value, both before and under your ownership. And then crystallization. And I don't like to sell. I ended up in the wrong business in private equity because I don't like to sell. But I had to do that every third and fifth year. But now, fortunately, the holding periods are longer. Now we're talking about maybe 7, 8, 10. We have owned one company for 12 years now, and has gone from 200 million in sales to 5 billion kroner in sales. So there's a couple of ways of looking at the world from when you do acquisitions. And that's, I think, and now I've used my 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. And it's super good to also get your framework on how you're thinking and looking at the deals. We will now ask the audience to actually respond to a bit of a poll. And the question is really, from your perspective, and this is the tough one, you can just choose one. Which area do you think is most important to create value in your business? Is it straight to the strategic intent? Is it to be clear on the elements of the value creation plan? Or is it to putting culture to the heart of the deal? So I'm going to let people answer. I think we've got it enough. So I'm ending the poll and I'm sharing the results. Can you see the results now, Mikael and Sofia? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So then I actually wanted to start with, Do you want to comment on the result? Is there something that kind of surprised you in that? Do you want to start, Sofia?
No, I mean, it's coming back to why it is the three biggest areas, so to say, and you have an even spread, because it can be a bit different business, but in general, I mean, no one of these really strikes out big. It is really why I would say the average. It's a one spread. I think that's actually the take out. I say it's due to the fact that it is the three top things.
Right. And Michael, do you want to comment?
No, I agree with Sofia. It's hard to prioritize because they're all extremely important.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that we ended up with this score.
Right. So then I want you to go back a bit to the market, and I mean, you have both been in the market for a while, and it's still just growing. And now I think everybody that sits in leadership is in many ways involved in M&A right now. So why is it that it's so high? And when you contrast an industry deal versus a private equity deal, what are the differences? What are you looking for? Do you want to start, Michael?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's I think the first time in the history of the modern civilization where we have an extended period with zero cost of capital or close to zero cost of capital. And that creates, of course, incredible opportunities, but also a lot of unhealthy practices, a lot of artificial processes. So, and I can see in several of the companies that we are involved in that values have increased tremendously. And I can agree to a lot of the value creation and the value building, but I feel that personally, I feel we're over the top. Unless we will have zero interest for the next 10 years, then this is a giant experiment where we're changing the debt to the governments. It's the government's financing, and the people who are wealthy just become more and more wealthy, and it's not good from a social texture point of view. But that's maybe outside this topic. But I think we have to be a bit careful. So it's in the private equity industry, very high activity in Procuritas. I still say I don't have any operational responsibility, but I'm still a shareholder in all the funds and in the GPs and so on. And we have sold a lot of companies for extremely good multipliers. In the Big Mestan, which is a listed investment company, we have both unlisted and listed investments. And there's been a tremendous development. And that's because several of the companies that we're involved with are buy and build situation, where you're still able to buy at a decent multiplier, and then the public market assess a different multiplier, a higher, which is of course correct, because it's one thing buying one, let's call it a travel agent in Skövde, which is completely reliant on Volvoverken in Skövde, compared to buying, like when we own tickets, you have 50 travel agencies all over Sweden. Then you have a different risk, and then you can be able to prepare a higher multiplier, which is one of the reasons, besides synergies, etc., you have this multiple arbitrage.
Yeah, super good.
Yeah.
And this linkage with the difference between private equity and industry, can you say something about that? And
well,
also, Sofia?
Sure, and I can just add a little bit that we have seen lately that, and I'm a bit schizophrenic as I have one leg in each part, but we have seen some cases where our portfolio companies have been able to compete with private equity. Private equity has offered to buy them, but we have been able, or the portfolio company have been able to pay a very nice multiplier and approach the deal very much in the same way as a private equity company. I think industry is catching up. So they can go and say, we can offer you some kind of phantom stock. We do this due diligence process similar way. We can offer you various ways of building your company similar to private equity, and then we can offer extremely long term. We can offer you eternal ownership rather than maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 years. So we have outcompeted in some of the companies where I'm involved in. We have outcompeted private equity because we've been able to offer a slightly different story, but still with many of the good things of private equity.
That's very interesting. Sofia, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I would say it's, it's also, as mentioned, different type of ownership. So it will always be a bit different how it looks into. But what we see, for example, of working a lot with the industries, then in general, they have before maybe bought part of their supply chain or the plan. So they maybe bought a distributor or a partner or similar. So they're very well aware of the business. They know it's more that they maybe need help with the financials or the taxes, etc. But from a commercial perspective, they have an ongoing relationship. It's close to them. They know about it. However, what they are now catching more and more into, as I talked about, is, for example, you need to acquire a tech company because you need some technology. You need to maybe acquire some other type of business. And for them, this is not normal. How do you put a valuation on something which you have not really evaluated before? And you evaluate them what you think they will be in 10 years. So we see it's a different type of mindset from them who's been very kind of in the safe harbor of how to look at as a prospect, and then how they need to think now. Compare maybe to the private equity who has been more looking into, okay, I see that this is a type of market we want to go into because we see there is potential. And maybe there is a question on having more understanding of the numbers, and maybe because they didn't have maybe the industrial expert before in that they see the opportunity. So it has been a very different mindset where you see the industrial companies more going into how the private equity has been looking into the companies. And as you say, then you have also the industry companies who start thinking like a private equity company as well. So it's changing a lot now due to where we are in the world.
Thank you so much. I wanted to bring in my colleague, Katja. Katja has been monitoring the Q&A here for us. Do we have any questions, Katja?
Yes, we do have questions. We have 2 questions. So I want to address the first one to Mikael. It's from Alexander Rosenlöv. And Alexander says that he thanks for excellent comments. And how would you best get the momentum already before the deal? And how would you, fast or ruthless, would you be in integration if you buy a competitor?
Well, great questions, which are much related to value creation. Let me start with the first one. I think one of the key aspects of doing deals is to gain trust. If you gain trust with your counterpart, you avoid so much unnecessary, let's say, troubles, annoyances. And one of the best ways, I think, to create momentum is to share some of your weaknesses. If you do that, the other party often share some of his or her weaknesses. And then maybe you can construct a bridge between your 2 positions. And I don't know how much interested you are in game theory, but there is a game called Prisoner's Dilemma. And the most effective strategy was a guy called Robert Axelrod. He was running several computer runs analysis. It turned out that the best strategy was to give away a little bit of your own position. Then the counterparty did the same. You build trust, and then you cooperated. Every step you cooperated. And if someone cheated, then you had a problem. Then both had a problem. And that is very interesting. After it's called tit for tat. And after that, in evolutionary biology, they found out that also animals act the same. I would say all other animals than us act the same way. So I think creating trust cooperating, being transparent. It's a great way of creating momentum in a deal. And then over to the second, I think, of course, you can lie and say, oh, everything is going to be run exactly the same after and so on. But I think you're just shooting yourself in the foot. It's better to be open, and more so frequently the vendor knows that a lot of things have to be done. So when we do acquisitions, we have not always been ruthless, but sometimes you have to be ruthless. But the interesting thing is most people understand why you have to do it. They understand that things are wrong and has to be changed.
Super good, thank you. Katja,
Thank
did
you.
you have another one as well?
Yeah, we have another question, so let's take that as well to both of you. Given that multiples have increased as much as they have, you need to find a lot of synergies in order to get a reasonable payback. Is this a bubble, and how long will it last?
The $100 million question. Do you want to speculate?
I can maybe start and or try to speculate, but of course, I mean, that's the synergies. You can't make up too much of them. I mean, you still need to realize them. And I think it's talking about synergies, you have the cost synergies and you have the revenue synergies. And the cost synergies, they are more easy to track because that could be, for example, headcount reduction, closing down branches, moving costs. So that you can be very clear and you can very clearly link it to an acquisition. However, when it comes to revenue, it's much more difficult to find in the budget or similar like this. We have an increase of sales because we did this integration, or we can cross sell, we can go to new market due to the deal. So it's always much more challenging to actually show how you have realized the revenues on that end and the synergy end. So, I mean, you still need, it's something you go out to with your shareholders if you're listed companies. So you need to be very sure that what you say is something you can deliver. So but then coming back, it's not just only the synergies, come back to what we talked about before. It is also how to generate other aspects. And I think it all comes around to be better to look at all the aspects of the value creation, i.e. what do you have on the balance sheet? How do you actually operate a business? It doesn't need to be a synergy that you are better to work with your suppliers and creating a better kind of way you're working. So I think it's more coming that it is a limit how much synergies can promise because the business is what it is. It's more how do you optimize the business within. I think that's how you actually generate the most value.
Thank you.
Well, I think with my experience, I've often found post-deal, a year after when you evaluate the deal, there are more arguments why the synergies failed than you have arguments before you do deal why there are synergies.
Yeah.
You always end up not reaching your synergies. That's or 70%, 80% of the cases. So you can't. You have to be very careful when you evaluate the synergies, and it's very difficult today. I think to really. It's hard to buy companies based on the present multipliers that companies are sold for. At least I feel so. I've been, I'm very fundamentalistic, so I find it difficult. And I do think we live in a bubble, and then it's a question: will it be a bubble where the air slowly evaporates, or will it be a big crash? And I have no clue. I just hope for the first.
Right. And it's still a very interesting discussion to have. I thought we would actually ask our audience another question, and it was alluded to earlier by Sofia, and it relates to environment, social and governance. So we wanted to ask you, how much attention do you actually have to this topic of ESG in your business? Is it high? Is it some? Is it limited? Or if you don't know? So the environment, social and governance, and what the attention is to that in your business. And I think we will do a quick poll. So I'll stop the poll in 2 seconds. And I'll share the result. Here we go. So I don't just want you to comment now on whether they have high attention. I want you to comment on how is the attention in deals and M&A on this topic. That is the question. Sofia, do you want to start?
Yeah, so I can start. As I mentioned before, we see it that you want to have a sustainable investment. And what you can see is that before, it's a very kind of subjective topic. What does it mean that you are following ESG? And there are now coming various regulation on EU level on how actually start measuring this, which I think actually will improve this more, because it also has to become one of these topics you're supposed to talk about. You should have it on your agenda, but what does it actually mean for us, and what are we doing with it, and how do we measure on it? And that is something which is being improved, but it is a question, and we see that from our clients who ask us how can we better look into it. And as I mentioned in my presentation before, private equities are leaving some of the deals which they wouldn't have left a few years back due to these topics, because again, even though maybe you hold the company a bit longer today than a few years ago, you are still, the proposal is still to sell in the end of the day, and you want to be sure that this is sellable. So we see a really high attention, but a lot of question is also how do we ensure it? What do we measure on it? And I think part of this regulation will be able to help to be a bit more transparent on it, and just not something you talk about.
Yeah. And what is your perspective on the ESG or environment, social governance agenda, Mikael?
Well, I think it's like the internet. I always said you need to have it ingrained in your business. Environmental aspects are extremely important. We're leaving a huge debt to our children and grandchildren, and we need to fix it. Everyone have to play a part. The social part, when it comes to gender equality, for example, contrary to some people's belief, I do believe there's a difference between men and women, and that's why we complement each other extremely well. And that's why companies need men and women in all levels, board, management, everywhere. Because we complement each other's how we think and act. And then governance. You need to have proper governance also in all levels of the companies, including whistleblowers and others. So ESG is here and will stay. It will be a natural part of running businesses. And we have been doing in all companies with various success and various intensiveness and so on. But we are with the companies I'm involved in, many but not all are very active. Privately, I've, as you alluded to initially, I've been doing a lot of philanthropic work relating to, for example, democracy and other aspects of the welfare state, because I think it's important. And I see a lot of other colleagues doing similar things.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think it's super intense right now. Katja, can you pick one of the questions that has come in now? I don't think we will have time for all. We'll see if we can get some answers out to the other ones.
Yes, I will. Thank you. It's an active audience. That's really, really great. So one question then, going forward, which industries in Sweden do you foresee will have the intense M&A activities, and what was the pandemic impact on these industries? Who wants to start, Mikael or Sofia?
I hope Sofia starts, because that was a difficult one.
Yeah.
So I think how I see it, I still think a high activity in the financial services, and then expanding it a bit to the fintech, the technology. The financial services still has a lot to do and work with on the technical platforms, how they go to the market, the offerings, the consumers are more demanding on what we want for our bank providers, insurance providers, etc. So, and there is also a very good environment for startups, etc., within the Nordics of this type of business. So I still think that we'll see a lot of that going forward.
Well, I think you're right, Sofia. I actually am a bit lost. I haven't thought about that, which areas, but I guess life science, various parts of life science, but also the hospitality industry must have been, is extremely squeezed, continues to be extremely squeezed. I assume there'll be a lot of, maybe not huge M&A, some large M&A deals, but a lot of, let's say, micro M&A activities. But that's two out of many.
Yeah, but it's still very interesting. Can you share a bit how is strategy revisit for private equity and for industrial companies changing due to this intense M&A things going on? Can you say anything about that?
So I didn't. Sorry, Liselott. I didn't catch you last. Could you just repeat the last question?
Yeah, sure. So how is the strategy revisit changing with private equity or with the industry due to this just increasing intense of M&A?
Okay.
Do you want to go first, Michael?
Well, I think the M&A as an activity is of course important. But the most important shift that I see in all the companies is the tremendous effort that's invested in online activities. All the companies where you can have some kind of online presence is trying to convert into online presence. And what we have seen from an M&A perspective, we sold a company recently in Procuritas called Sofa Company, which was a online, but with some small stores, but it was an omni-channel, but primarily it was an online business with some stores where you can go in and have a look at the sofas, but you bought it online. We sold that to business to the Larsen Group, which is Jyske. And they bought it not only for the sofas are made in Vietnam and so on, but they bought it because they wanted the online business.
Right.
They wanted the technology, how it's working, so that they easily could plug their other business into the Sofa Company's online system. Those kind of transactions, I think, could be quite common.
Very interesting. Do you want to have a final comment on this, Sofia?
I think it's a bit into what Michael was just mentioned, that it's acquiring competence or activities which fit into your platform, i.e. it offers something which you in one way or another cannot build yourself, or you think that someone has already done it better, so I better acquire them than try to make and reinvent the wheel when someone already have invented it.
Thank you so much, and I'd love to. We could do several hours of this. It's super interesting, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I want to give the word back to our president. Please, back to you. And we can't hear you.
You go unmuted.
Yeah.
So yes, very good. Thank you very much. Exciting stuff, and very great to hear from both Sofia and from Michael about the experience, the hands-on experience that you've had in this area. Very insightful. We appreciate the time that you have given for us today to listen to your input on this topic. As we also all know and read about, it's really at an all-time high, the acquisition activity at the moment. And as you have also mentioned, Michael, the business ethical aspects are important, and we need to make sure that it really helps us all in promoting business as a force for good, which is also one of the focus areas for the community that we are gathered here today. So thank you all for that, and a little promotion around INSEAD, of course, that we are developing leaders, or that the community that's often associated with the INSEAD Alumni Association are focused around business as a force for good, and we have and at the school are promoting very exciting education and programs that can help you strengthen your competences in just this area. So please go to next slide, Liselott. Also, I think this is the last slide we have on our kind of promoting the activities that you can link into, or that you can join. We have our lifelong learning. Some of it is for INSEAD alumni only, but we also have quite a lot of activities in terms of lifelong learning, and you will get the presentation slides as it's been answered in the questions and answers, and you can find the links to the appropriate additional insight and training that you can join. We also have a local board in Sweden where we actually at the moment looking for a participant who would like to join us to lead the local activities within the Women in Business, the local club leader. So you're very welcome to contact me or one of the board members if you are interested in such spending your time on that. And last slide, Liselott, in terms of the international director network and activities, there is a lot of topics going on there, a lot of activity in this area that we will also send out to you. You can check out through those links there. So that's pretty much it that we have for you today. If you go to the last slide, Liselott, we again would like to thank all of you, especially the speakers. It's been great to have you giving us some inspiration today about how to succeed within M&A and add value for the world, for the society, and to all of you listening in, thank you for taking the time. We hope you've got some inspiration from joining us today, and will join us in upcoming events. We will have one already after the summer, which is focused around lifelong learning. So thank you very much, and have a